So today we have another patron request. Vladimir Weiss has asked me to review Roselina today, so let's not waste any time. Definitely a better waifu than Teacher Daisy, but she's pretty underwhelming in Smash. I'll give her a solid 8 out of 10. Very respectable waifu rating. Thanks everyone for watching. I'll see you. Oh wait. They actually asked me to review an old creepypasta that they wrote themselves. This is territory I'm still not used to. The closest thing I've done to this was reading Jeff the Killer 1x1 way back when, and I have a pasta written by a commenter saved on my system that was deleted by the Creepypasta wiki, so I'll have to get to that sometime soon. On the subject, this pasta isn't on the Creepypasta wiki. It's on a very, very small wiki called the Outdated Pastas wiki. If I had to guess, Vladimir here is the only one running the place. So it looks like it could use some traction. At the very least, it seems like it could be a decent archive for lots of people's old pastas and OCs. I have no idea what I'm getting into with this story, and Vladimir hasn't said much about it aside from the fact that it's old. So I have no idea if I'm meant to expect it to be of substandard quality. Regardless, as with all the pastas I cover, I'm gonna give it a fair shake and see what we end up with. Here we go. So I finished the story, it wasn't very long, and I'm sorry to say I'm not exactly impressed. And to fully explain why, we need to go into the premise. This is a story about an evil doll, and I have to put my bias out there right now. I'm really not a fan of evil doll stories. A lot of people find dolls creepy because they fall into the uncanny valley, and they'll just sort of sit there watching you with these cold, dead eyes, but at the end of the day, it's just a hunk of plastic. Even if it did come alive, what could it really do? And in a written story, you don't get that sensation of being watched by something tangibly there, which takes out a lot of the horror factor. You have to be really good at imagery to pull it off in a way that works for me. It can't just be like Laughing Jack, where the story just assumes you're already scared of clowns, so an evil clown makes it a million times worse, right? Again though, I'll say this isn't entirely on the pasta. Some of this does fall into my bias against doll stories. However, the story itself isn't doing any favors for my opinion on it. Once you find out it's about a doll in the first paragraph, you can see where the story is going to go from there. The doll's alive the entire time and now bad things are going to happen. This story actually does give a nice spin on things by not having the doll run around with a knife or a chainsaw Tails doll style, but rather by having it directly mentally manipulate its owner and our protagonist. I greatly prefer this approach to the Child's Play Chucky style, though the events that take place within this decent doll premise are unfortunately predictable and kind of underwhelming. On the subject of the characters, they're also something of a weak point. There's the protagonist, Alex, who doesn't have much to him. He's just creeped out by his friend Sarah's doll collection, and especially her newest doll, Roselina. And Sarah herself just really likes dolls. The pacing of the story is very fast, so there isn't much time to get to know them or see the effects of the doll's mental stranglehold on Sarah. Something that, with some time and character put in, could have a decent creepy effect. Instead, we have to be reassured by Alex that the way she's acting once possessed is uncharacteristic of her. In the beginning of the story, she really likes dolls, and she still does once she's taken control of. The only difference between both characters after the mind control takes place is that now they're both really cool with murdering random Hispanic dudes for no reason. The way I see it, there's a couple ways to do a kind of story like this. 1. Make it longer, slower paced, and more character focused. Or 2. Make it about the same length and more plot focused. This story is short, sure, but it spends a lot of time on the characters and dialogue that doesn't amount to much. It's just kind of reiterating things we already know, so the plot is now extremely bare bones. Like a doll, it ends up falling into this kind of uncanny valley itself. It's like poetry. Also, speaking of the dialogue, it's all written into these large, disorganized blocks that are very awkward to read. Characters will speak, and then it's just a back and forth for an entire paragraph, even when new characters are introduced that make this even more difficult to decipher. It's a good thing those new characters don't last very long, or this could be really bad. Dialogue is usually broken up like this, with each line or passage as its own paragraph, usually having descriptive language breaking up the monotony of a simple back and forth chain of dialogue. Simple things that say what the characters are doing or how they're reacting to things as they're speaking. This is more of a structure issue than a writing one, but it can easily impact your enjoyment of a story just as much as a plot hole or bad grammar. So I guess with all that out of the way, it's time to talk about the events in the story itself. It begins very simply with our protagonist Alex telling us about his friend Sarah and her love of dolls. Whenever she gets a new doll, she brings it right over to show it off, and today is no different, as she brings over an old, worn-out looking doll in a red dress. Apparently she got it at Walmart, and if that isn't a good enough excuse for it to be pure evil, then I don't know what is. Maybe Smiley gave it to her, I don't know. We get that thing where something blatantly creepy is happening, but the protagonist is like, yeah, whatever. Probably just something in my eye, as he sees the silhouette of the doll outside before going to sleep. I'm sure nothing bad will come of this. I always find this annoying in stories. Like, if you see something moving outside your house, even if it's small, you're gonna want to check it out. Maybe it could be a cute animal, or a funny midget, or my self-esteem. He wakes up from a dream because would it be a horror story without dreams that telegraph the upcoming events of the story and pad out the length? In the dream, Sarah's new doll is talking with him before getting angry and scooping out his eyes with a spoon before saying something in Spanish. The story's words, not mine. It's the first of many tenuous and weird Spanish connections. Sarah comes over after Alex's shift at work and wait, what? This guy has a job? How old is he? I was reading this story under the assumption that these were like little kids, mostly because of Sarah's doll collection and tea parties with them. Okay, wow, this story just got a lot weirder. Anyway, she's upset that the new doll, Roselina, threw out half of her old ones and is apparently magical as she was talking and singing to her. Alex is like, whatever, but Sarah insists he come over to her tea party that night and prove it to him. She even got him his own doll, Jorge. He's a dapper little chap. And the next in our list of weird Spanish connections. They drive over to Sarah's house, yeah, I'm still not used to the fact that these are apparently adults, and they head down to her basement for the tea party. Sarah leaves Alex alone with the dolls, and he casually says hi to Roselina, prompting an hola from her. Alex's reaction to this doll being magical and alive is honestly hilarious to me. We get a grand total of 2 sentences for this revelation that magical dolls exist. Great, it speaks Spanish. Looks like Sarah was right. And that's it. That's all we get. Sarah comes back down, bringing with her a picture of what looks like, and most definitely is not, fruit punch. Apparently, the thing that tips Alex off about how weird this is not the fact that the picture smells like blood, it's that Sarah hates fruit punch. He goes up to her room to, I guess, investigate, and sees it covered in blood and dead bodies and shit. Sarah shows up, and he doesn't think to overpower her and call the police on his friend who is obviously a serial killer. Again, this is weird if they're adults, but not so much if they're kids. If Alex here is a grown-ass man, then you should be able to just tackle her and be done with it. Or just, like, hold his hand on her forehead. I mean, I can understand being scared because of all the dead bodies, but she's not even armed. She calls Alex Jorge as if he's the doll she just gave him, but Alex doesn't even have Jorge, so she runs down to get him. Alex tries to escape, but again, Sarah just teleports behind him, now with Jorge. Jorge gives a charming little Spanish greeting. So charming, in fact, that Alex is now basically completely possessed and goes along with everything now. Back down in the basement, Sarah says they'll be having company soon, and 2 Mexican teens show up in a tuxedo. They only had enough money for one. I can tell they're Mexican because their names are Jose and Carlos. Again, weird Spanish connections, I don't get it either, let's just move on. And can I just say, I have a hard time believing that these Mexican teenager dudes would be going to some random girl's tea party unless they're expecting some nookie. Let's just be perfectly clear on that. Why are they even here? They all head to her room, I assume for that nookie, and our new friends are horrified by what they see. And I'd like to apologize to Vladimir at this point, because the story really goes off the wall here and I can't help but laugh at it. So Sarah grabs a knife, and the 2 teens beg for their lives, with Jose even saying he has a wife and 2 kids. As a teenager, Jose is getting busy early, god damn. His tactics don't work, and he's the first to die, as Carlos screams, "Gah, you people are loco!" To which Sarah replies, "We're not loco. Just lonely." Good God. I have to say, this is probably the funniest murder I've read in a creepypasta, which is pretty horrible of me, no matter how you slice it. But I'm having fun here, which is more than I can say for a lot of the other stories I read. Anyway, to cap off the story, Alex heads back down to the basement, And Sarah brings our poor boys down too, their organs and bones having been removed and their bodies stuffed. Sarah ought to take up a career in taxidermy. The tea party can finally begin as Alex takes a sip of delicious blood. So that's our story. This was such a weird-ass episode to make. Not only because I am so not used to the idea of tearing apart a story made by someone who very kindly gave me money, but also because this story is just fucking weird. The dialogue is surreal and formatted in such a bizarre way that makes it downright hard to read, and so much time is spent on it, yet I have no idea what the characters are like, except for their most two-dimensional traits. The pacing seems lightning fast and incredibly slow at the same time, with the story being quite short and getting from point A to point B fairly quickly, but having you trudge through basically nothing happening for a good while before exploding in one of the most tonally jarring climaxes I've ever read. As for what's going on paranormally speaking, we can only guess. If I had to throw my hat into the ring, I'd say the doll is possessed by a murderous Hispanic ghost or spirit or something. That's the only thing I can think of that ties everything together, including the constant Spanish references that are never elaborated on by the story itself. Or maybe it was just the Spanish Inquisition.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition!
I don't know what to make of any of this. I guess if I had to come to a positive conclusion, I'd say the story has potential, more so than a lot of other stories I've read. It just probably wouldn't be for me considering my bias against evil dolls. But if you lengthen the story a bit, flesh out the characters, at the very least give hints as to what the whole Spanish thing is, or what the doll's deal is, so the audience has a little mystery to solve on top of all the spooks, and please God get rid of the local lines, I think you'd have a decent story on your hands. I'm so sorry, Vladimir. I've never felt the need to apologize this much for ripping into a story. Please forgive me. Although I hope you had fun with this video. And that goes for the rest of you guys watching too. This was definitely different for me, so I hope it wasn't too much of a pace breaker from the usual stuff. It'll be back to business as usual next time, so I'll see you all then. And thanks to the donators like Vladimir, who you can see now. I'll see you all next time.